This year was the first year that I coached basketball, youth basketball, rec basketball, and it taught me a lot on leadership. Being a coach, you're automatically a leader. Someone the kids look up to, aspire to learn from, and aspire to guidance during critical situations, that be in the game, practice, or if they bring situations from the house to you, which fortunately I didn't have any of that this season. Some key things that coaching taught me this year in my first year, in my first league. Two things, and they both apply not only to sports, but to the real world. And the first is specialists lead in their specialty. So a shooter that's known for shooting, they lead automatically. It's like a natural leadership capability in them to excel. So your shooters, your rebounder, your passer, your two-way defender, your two-way player, your ball hawk, all of that comes out. Everyone's a specialist in some type of way, and they lead in that specialty. Second, to counter that, is generalists lead across the board. And what I mean by that is your generalist, your floor general, that can be your all-star player, not superstar. Keep in mind, I said your all-star player. Your generalists, usually your floor general in basketball, they're able to evaluate the game as it's going and make decisions on the fly in addition to the game plan that the coach puts together. So in this case, the floor general is able to create space themselves personally with the ball, or if they don't have the ball, around moving to empty space, but also command others to do something in order for the team to get some points or a steal. The best way for that to happen is for you to instill your players with trust. You're the floor general. I trust you with the ball. I trust you to make decisions on behalf of the team. And what I realized was I had about 3 generalists on my team. So I had a team of 10. 3 of them were your generalists. They were the top leaders of the team. But they knew, like, hey, I'm not going to name any names just for the privacy of my team. So I'm just going to use some random names. But Jimmy, my floor generalist, or my one guard, knew that Jack is a center. He's big and he could get rebounds. So he will identify throughout the game, hey, Jack, I've noticed this is happening with you in your matchup. You should kind of beat him in a little bit, and then I got you on the inside. As a coach, we already know that. That's our job as coaches, is to evaluate the game, how our players are playing. Do we need to plug in a different player that will play better at that time with that core group that's out there, or what changes should we make? So your generalists are there to really evaluate the game as it's going on and make a decision on the fly. Give some feedback on the fly. And at the same time, your specialists, so let's say you have your rebounding specialist, he'll tell the floor general, hey, you're not taking enough shots yourself. Like, come on in and I'll hit that screen for you. That way you get a layup. And if you don't, I'll get a rebound. I'll focus on my specialty. It's something that I noticed throughout the season, and it, to me, it really resonated because I played basketball. That was my favorite sport growing up. All throughout high school, I played throughout college, a lot of intramural and pickup. But when you coach for the first time, and I coached in high school in the little leagues that we had as high school players and camp players and all of that. But when you sit back and you you coach for the first time in a while and you're on the other side of the game, you're not playing, you start putting things together of how these are our future leaders of future businesses and how they can make an impact and make a difference. And it starts at a young age in a game such as rec basketball. Now, these are 9, 10, 11-year-olds. Yeah, 10, 11-year-olds that I was coaching. So they're right on that cusp of identifying their talents to take their game to the next level. I was fortunate enough to have 10 excellent players across the board who understood what their strong points were already. So we were able to kind of build out a second strong point and help them develop an archetype for themselves. A second observation that I made throughout the season is your superstars are not necessarily your best leaders. They're your best players. They can carry the back on their team when they need, but they're not necessarily the best leaders. There's a lot of pressure on your superstar players, and if they're not performing well, it may come back on them and they may just become drained. And we finished the season 6-2. We lost our first game. It was an extremely low scoring game. It was 7-4. There's no words to describe kind of what had happened that game. We just simply weren't dropping buckets. We were getting tons of steals. It should have been a blowout, but we lost. And the second game we lost was halfway through the season. So after we had put away a few teams, 29-8, 23-10, and 17-8. So those were 3 games that we had won, and then we lost in our own fashion. We lost 21-8 one game. And I'll tell you, after that loss, it struck a chord with the players. And we had practice. We ran suicides, but I made sure we had fun. And that leads into another lesson is, as coaches, it's our job to identify not only the strong points, so this is what's done in the beginning of the season. That's our guard. He can handle the ball. That's our center or 4, our 4 or 5. They have rebounds or they have size. That's a shooter. He can shoot. He shoots better off screen. He shoots better straight up. That's a shot creator. That's a playmaker. And then you play your first 2 games and you realize a lot of players play different in the game than they do in practice. So now you kind of tweak and tune up your practice schedule to kind of match up those players' strengths with their team. You can be a great shooter all in all, but when you play together and you're not shooting well because you're not used to it, that's an issue. Second is identifying their weaknesses to make them stronger. So, of course, at a young age, it's all about fundamentals. Dribble, pass, shoot, rebound, communicate. And then the subspecialties below that. So as a coach, as a leader of the team, you need to push your players outside of their comfort zone. This all lines up. Everything that I'm saying makes sense in a professional world. As coaches, we're also there to identify and push players into the right direction. There's a lot of times throughout the games where we would have a timeout, maybe we'd be losing, or maybe just the team was confused and we'd get into the huddle and you could just see the confusion in the players. It could be amongst them, maybe they weren't communicating enough, or they're just not sure what's going on. That falls on the coaches to make sure that we have a new game plan or to refresh the team on the game plan moving forward. So, as leaders, it's our responsibility to calm them down, readjust the game plan based on what had just happened. So just helping them understand, hey, that was a great play, that was a great screen. We just didn't execute the shot part of it. We didn't execute the second pass. You guys did great through the first pass, through the screen, but the second pass, that's where you guys are confused. At the end of the day, it's all perspective. How we view things. There's natural born leaders, and then there's leaders who develop skill sets to help put people in their best positions. Everything that I just talked about applies to the real world. When it comes to specialists, your specialists are your go-to for that niche, for that specialty. But if you look at who's leading them, they have a team lead, and then above the team lead, usually a director who manages multiple teams, and that director is now a generalist. From my experience in the professional world, your best leaders are your generalists. They're the ones who understand different business units, different parts of the organization, and they're able to put team members together to execute on the project. Your specialists are extremely important though, because they're the ones who execute much of the plans. I'm in sales. I've been in the profession of selling for almost 9 years. Split between startup experience and scaled environments. And I can tell you it now makes sense. Seeing who were the best leaders, seeing that your best salesperson isn't necessarily your best coach. They're not your best manager. Because they learned the game, most likely themselves and through some training, and they learned how to play the game and excel at that skill. That doesn't mean that if you put them in a leadership position, that now they're going to be able to train 5 other people to become themselves. Doesn't work. I was in 2 environments that were like that. Well, this guy's the best salesperson. Do what he does. I don't sell like that. Even though we're both consultative salespeople, I still have a different approach. That's why I've always had an issue with scripts. I believe a script should be a guideline, but you should not be reading a script word for word. You need to have your own personal touch and learn how to communicate with someone effectively. If it's consumer driven emotionally, if it's business driven, then strategically, and obviously financially focused. Financially or through efficiency. That's the difference between consumer sales and business sales. That's a good video to make. B2C versus B2B. Once I got into B2B sales, it was a wrap. I'm not a fan of B2C sales. It's easier in terms of communicating with them and getting them emotionally wound up to close the sale, but it's so much more transactional. I 1000% prefer B2B sales. I prefer working with not only my internal stakeholders, which would be engineers, product managers, the marketing team, finance, legal, to put a complex agreement and relationship together with external stakeholders or clients and their developers, their product team, their marketing team. Personally, I find it more rewarding and it definitely pays more. But back on track. Tying it to the real world, even though we had 2 losses, I made sure my players had fun. We started practice with conditioning, with running. We reviewed how the last practice and or game was, what were the key lessons, and we identified what opportunities we needed to address in the next practice after a game. This was a way of teaching the kids how to identify their weaknesses, identify opportunities, but not only for themselves, but amongst each other, and learn how to play, learn how each player functions. I made sure that we ended practices with a bang, with a memory, some fun. We sprinkled a couple of games throughout each practice, usually one in the middle, and then we would do a couple of more drills, and then end it with a scrimmage or a fun game. But we were serious. When it was game day, it was time to roll. And the players gelled well together. Part of it is based on the drills that we would do. Second part of it was trusting the players to do what they do best. They all understood their specialty and understood who's commanding the floor on each of the lineups. I mentioned it. It's not about replicating superstars. And in the real world, it's not about replicating superstars. It's just not possible. It's about creating an environment to create a pathway for one to become a superstar. If not, all to become superstars. And this goes straight into the real world. We're oftentimes thinking, man, I want to become the best. But if you're not enabled to become the best, if you're working for a team, if you're working for another company, and you're not enabled to become the best, it is extremely hard to become the best version of yourself. Because then you're doing work that's not yours. You're doing work that is your manager's. You're doing work that's on other teams. And that chips away on you. Everyone's not a leader. That doesn't mean that everyone's a follower, but everyone is not meant to be in a leadership position. If you can't play together with a team, if you can't identify someone's strong points and identify how you can make them stronger on some of their weaknesses while utilizing the talent, the other talent in your team, then leadership may not be a role for you. If you think being a leader is creating little mini-me's, that's false. But we'll make a follow-up on this. We had a pizza party today, so I wanted to touch base on kind of how our season went and some of these key lessons that I learned from my first year of coaching on leadership. I definitely sharpened up some skills, but more importantly, I learned processes around enabling others to become the best versions of themselves. And that's what we did. We ended the season 6-2, and we beat the top 3 teams in the league by margin. And I'm proud of them. I'm proud of the co-coach. I'm proud that I was approached with this opportunity by the coach, and we're ready for the next season. People, man. I'm ready to apply this to the real world too. Hopefully you do too. Till next video, we out.